Thanks very much, and thanks again for the very kind invitation to come along here today. So, if I'm a bit distracted, it's because of my idea I've got for pitching a 7-part television series about traveling around America, showing different banks how to personalize their EMV risk management parameters. It doesn't sound much to you, but I feel we can win with this. So thank you for the idea. I really do appreciate that. I'll steal ideas from anywhere. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes, hopefully, is to try and meet the goals of the conference, which is to try and help you to think a little bit differently about a topic. And that topic is money. And I want to try and show you why money is about to change in what I think will be some unexpected ways, and why actually that's a rather exciting thing. So I've called it Money as a Hack. You'll see why in a moment. I just want to make one point before I begin, which is this isn't some kind of hippie rubbish about money. I have an utterly mercenary so. The people that we work for, I'll tell you up front, are people, like payment schemes and banks and so on and so forth. So I just want to get very clear, I have a real interest in this, but it's a business interest in it, and I want to be upfront with you about that. So let's just say the reason why I think some of these things are because I spend my day working in this business, and I can see the things that are changing. So I just wanted to say that up front. Okay, so here's the big picture, literally a big picture. I thought it'd be good to start with the big picture. Identity is the new money. That's the mantra that you're going to hear over and over again throughout this whole kind of episode. And I thought, I was told you were an artistic audience, so I thought a quote from Shakespeare would be a way to, that's how tech guys think, right? So if it's going to be artistic audience, I need a quote from Shakespeare. Fortunately, Shakespeare had already thought of all of this, as in most other things, quite a long time ago. And he summed it up much better than I can. Your identity is something which is so important in this kind of future world that we're looking at. It really is the kind of critical resource. And everything else will fit around that, and money is no different, and you'll see in a minute why this will be the case. I hope you'll be persuaded. Anyway, so the point is that's kind of like the summary of the whole talk as well as the introductory presentation. He's good at this sort of stuff. And the argument as to why identity is the new money, I mean, there are a number of different arguments, but what I want you to think about at this point is the relationship between what you might call social and financial capital. And so in the old days, I'm a naturally very conservative person, so when I say the old days, I mean Neolithic times. So in the old days, you remember the whole thing about the Jivans, the double coincidence of wants, and how trade takes place. And if I've got a pig and you need a cow, then I've got to find someone who can swap something for the pig that you'll want to swap for the cow. And I mean, you can sort of imagine how this. And that's all very problematic. So you go to records instead. So in Babylonian times, you invent banks and cuneiform tablets, and I get some grain in the granary, and I transfer the grain to you. And we don't want to go through all this stuff again. But the point is, it's very easy to have the kind of trust that makes that trade possible when you're in a Neolithic hunter-gatherer group. But once you begin to scale beyond that into cities, this is of course why it happened in Babylonia. You can't do that anymore. You need intermediaries to make it work. And one of the obvious intermediaries is cash. That actually is cash. You might not be aware, but the word cash actually is a very odd linguistic coincidence. It's because a Portuguese word for money and a Chinese word for money both sounded a bit like cash to us. They're actually different words, but and they're not linguistically related, but they both sound a bit like cash. And that is actual cash. That's Chinese money from 1,000 years ago. You made holes through the money and you tied them together with red string to carry the money around. Remember, those coins weren't worth very much, so you needed rather a lot of them to do any kind of business. And necessity being the mother of invention, that's one of the reasons why the Chinese invented paper money a long time before we did. So by the time Marco Polo went to China, in fact, they already had paper money. And they had rather a good plan, actually, for introducing it into circulation. They didn't need business plans and that sort of thing because Kublai Khan just made it the law that he would kill you if you didn't accept his paper money. And I've thought about suggesting this to the new governor of the Bank of England. He's Canadian, you see, and they're namby-pamby about this kind of thing. So the point is, in a little trust group, you can do everything on tick. You can say, well, I'll give you this pig, and you can fix my house for me next week, and I'll babysit the kids. And there used to be a thing like that in Brighton, actually, called Let's, which was a Neolithic hunter-gathering group somewhere up in Preston Park, I think, or around there. So those work on little groups, but they don't scale. So to scale, we need money as the intermediary. But we've all just got a new superpower. We have a superpower. That's the only way to describe it. Because I can now communicate, essentially, with anybody else on the planet instantly. Or at least anybody else that's on Twitter, which is the only people I care about. So I can pick up my phone and call any one of 5 billion other phones on the planet and get through to them instantaneously. The only way to look at that is that's a superpower. And because we have this superpower, we don't need some of the hacks that we needed in the past when we didn't have that superpower. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So we don't need no stinking badges. That's so funny because I didn't realize we were going to have this badge thing here. It's not... You think it's me being really witty and clever and stuff, and I appreciate that. But actually, it was just an utter coincidence. So you don't know who I am or what I do. So like in the old days, before we had this superpower, I could show you my degree, right? I have a degree from you. So if I want you to think something nice about me or think I'm clever or important or get me to do some work or something, you don't have to trust me, right, which you can't because you don't know me. So I can show you my diploma. That's real. That's not posed. I do actually have a degree. So well, I won't tell you. You can perhaps guess. We'll make it into a fun game afterwards. It's interesting what that does, because now you don't. You just go on LinkedIn, right? If you want to know whether I'm a dick or not, you don't do it by, I mean, the people here can judge. But if you're not in the room, if you're looking on TV, you go on LinkedIn, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook. You don't need those other kind of intermediaries anymore. And one of the interesting impacts of that, by the way, is it flattens the differentials between the different kinds of... So like, if I need you to do some kind of job, it might have mattered to me whether you had a degree from Oxford or UCL or somewhere like that, or you know, the Polytechnic of West England, or the University of Swindon, as I call it. I'm going to set it up. It doesn't actually exist, but I will. So with the profits from my TV series. Because the premium was on the badge, the hack, the intermediary, but when it isn't, that doesn't matter anymore, right? Because I just go on LinkedIn, I just go on Facebook, and I find the people I need to do things. In fact, we were just talking on the way. I'm working on a project at the moment, and one of my subcontractors is down in Sydney, Australia. And she just happens to be the best person for the job. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing anyway. So that's, you don't need these intermediaries. Those are hacks that we had to use to get over. And actually, I'll give you a real example of one of these. Direct debits. Direct debits are a very good example of this. Direct debits are a hack, right? Because we didn't have a proper payment system, it didn't work properly, we had to have direct debits. You don't need direct debits anymore, because now, when the gas company, the gas bill's due, they can just send you a message on your phone, the gas bill's due, and then you can say okay. Or when you didn't have that technology, you had to have the hack of the direct debit. And it's because it's a hack, it's costly and it doesn't quite work properly and things go wrong and blah, blah, blah. You don't need hacks anymore, is my point. Okay, so what does that mean about money? Well, that's an argument that's all about costs, you see. So what happens is, if you drink the Kool-Aid, to keep the liquid theory going, about these superpowers and the removal of intermediaries and the use of social capital to replace financial capital, then what you see is the costs of using that social capital fall to a point where it makes more sense to use them instead of using these intermediaries. money being the perfect example, right? So this is actually from Roskilde in Denmark. So the cost of using cash is actually quite high. You don't see it because the cost is diffuse, but the total social cost of society of cash is actually quite high. Once, in this case, debit cards fall below that level, which they are for most European countries, then it doesn't make sense to use the cash anymore. You might as well use the debit card. When you're using the debit card, that's about identity and trust. It's not about money anymore. It's about who I am and do you trust me, and you don't want to trust me, so you trust the bank. But of course, in the future, because of the expansion of those networks, you'll be able to do the reputational management down to the individual level, and the intermediary of the bank will be taken out as well. So this isn't a hippie thing. This is a costs thing. Once the costs of transacting using social capital fall below the costs of using intermediaries, you won't bother with those intermediaries anymore. We'll come back to this in a minute to see where that's going. Okay, so what does that mean about the future? It means, Jack Weatherford, I should say, is an anthropologist, and I quite often find, he wrote a book called The History of Money, which is a terrific book. I often find anthropologists have a better perspective on this kind of thing. And Jack Weatherford said, when we're talking about this kind of Neolithic trust group, that's what the future of commerce looks like. The future of commerce is commerce operating on tick inside these trust groups. It's just that because of the technology, the trust group is everybody. You know, the little tribe that we live in becomes everybody. And so you can operate within that group using the same mechanisms that we had before. So from the point of view of an anthropologist like this, the way that money works now, where you have central banks and pound notes, £10 notes and so on. Gave my age away there slightly, didn't I? The way that money works now is actually a blip. I mean, you think of it as a law of physics just because you're sort of used to having it all around you. But it's because of a particular set of circumstances and economic organization. And so to an anthropologist, when you look at the way this works, in the future, commerce will look like it was in the past. And I think that's a really interesting observation, which if you're trying to create strategies to move forward, it's very useful to bear that in mind. Now, let's have a look at the superpower again for a moment. Keith Hart is a fantastic, he wrote The Memory Bank, that book about money from a few years ago. You probably don't spend all your time reading books about money like I do, so you may not be familiar with them. But Keith Hart had actually thought about this quite a while before, and Keith said, because people become more connected, and become a different kind of social force. I mean, we now think like the connected consumer is different from the disconnected consumer, which is absolutely true. Connected consumers aren't just an agglomeration of individual consumers. They present a different kind of force. But that's true when it comes to this sort of thing as well. And the crucial technology, of course, is the mobile phone. That's the thing that's changed everything. So I guess a few years ago, if you'd have asked people about where money was, they'd probably think, well, maybe checks and credit cards and things, eventually that might displace cash and blah, blah. Whereas now we understand it's actually the mobile phone that's going to get rid of money. It's not plastic cards and computers and whatever, and I'll come back to that point in a minute as well. So I put this in at the last minute on the train just to wind up Aidan because he challenged me to do a presentation without mentioning Sergio Aguero, which I can't. 2-goal hero of City's victory on Tuesday night. The reason that says Sergio Aguero is because that's my fraud management technique. When you buy things in America, they make you sign. They don't have chips and pins, so they get you to sign for things. So I always sign in the name of South American footballers that play for Manchester City, because no, it's fraud management. Because if you were a criminal and I dropped my card in the street, the card says Dave Birch on it for hilarious reasons we don't understand. And it has my signature on the back to make it as easy as possible for criminals. I don't know why. This is how banks work. I don't understand the thinking. So if you were a criminal and you found my card, see, this is my clever algorithm, right? So you wouldn't know which South American footballer who plays for Manchester City I'm signing this month. You could make a horrible mistake and sign Pablo Zabaleta, you see. I would know. So I signed Sergio Aguero. So if a transaction ever gets disputed and the sales slip comes back and it says Dave Birch on it, then I know it must have been a criminal because I would never sign Dave Birch on it. So he thinks I'm just messing about. It's a sound fraud management technique. I'm making this sort of thing. Squaring the circle. What's happened to mobile phones in money over recent times? Well, you've seen the appeal. Well, you haven't because you're in the UK. but you've heard of this thing called Square, and over here we have things like iZettle. And so what's transformed is the mobile phone has become a way of taking payments, you see. That's the kind of revolution. So when you talk about mobile money, you think about using your mobile phone to buy your bus tickets and things like that, which obviously I do. So you think of using your mobile phone to pay for things, right? But because your mobile phone is a way of getting paid for things, that's what displaces money, right? When I could use cards everywhere but only in shops, I still need to use money because I might need to pay you for something. But when you can take cards, right, you don't need the money anymore because now my phone can just pay your phone. And since my phone can now pay your phone, we don't even need to mess about with the cards and the bits of plastic anymore. It's just my phone paying your phone. So this is why this is all coming to a head now because of this. And somebody said to me the other day, well, people like you meant technologists, people like you going away. So I remember when you were talking about the paperless office. Ha ha ha, that's as likely as the paperless bathroom. But this is what happens when you talk to... But he's an idiot. Because he doesn't know the figures, you see. People argue without knowing the figures. Peak usage of paper was many years ago. Paper usage has actually been declining for many years, right? If you know the figures, peak cash was some time ago as well. So if you look at these are actually for the US figures, but the UK figures are just the same. If you look at the figures, what you see is that the use of cash in transactions lags GDP, which you would expect, because the proportion of transactions at point of sale that are electronic is steadily going up, right? Whereas the total amount of cash in circulation goes ahead of GDP, right? Because that's called the cash gap, because most of the cash that's in circulation is used for drug dealing, money laundering, tax evasion. It's essentially only used for criminal purposes. And the Bank of England produce it for them. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. I'm going to put this on my list. I've got you know the website you could do, you know there's that website where you have petitions to petition the government if you can get enough signatures. So I've got a few petitions on there at the moment. So I've got one for changing the sirens on police cars to the music from Benny Hill, because I thought that would greatly aid the gaiety of the nation. I mean, you would still know it was a police car, right? But it will be fun, you know, is my point. So you could sign that one. But I've got another one, because of the new governor of the Bank of England. I've got a petition for Canadian-style currency reform, which means getting rid of the small coins and making the money out of plastic. And I've got a few extra additions on that as well, like banning £50 notes and so on. So a few more signatures and that would be appreciated. But the point you need to understand is we've already gone past peak cash. Most of the money that's in circulation is only used for criminal purposes. Now, the Bank of England earns seigniorage from this. So basically, I have to tell you, the note production unit of the Bank of England is the most profitable nationalised industry in history, right? Because they sell you £50 notes for £50, but those £50 notes cost like a penny or something to make. They make a colossal profit. Don't you feel like that's morally wrong? That you're reducing the costs of criminal activity and making it easy as possible for tax evaders and money launderers to operate, and the Bank of England is actually the Bank of England is not allowed to keep the loot, because they have to actually remit that to the Treasury, so it's the government that keeps the loot. But anyway, it's beside the point. The point is we've already gone past peak cash. That's the point I'm trying to make. So what would happen in a country where there was no cash, you might think, as a sort of thought experiment? And following the beer motif earlier on, how clever is this presentation? I've just worked beer into it as well. That picture is taken in not our pub, that's the pub across the road from our office. That's the Keystone in Guildford, the best pub in the entire world. I pestered Kath, the landlady, mercilessly to get her to put in a contactless terminal so that we could pay with our phone. I have a very small view of the world, you have to understand. But we pestered Kath until she put in a contactless terminal. So you can pay with your phone in our pub. Why aren't you more flabbergasted by that? It's like living in Star Trek when you come down to Guildford. It really is. It's a little window into the future is the way I like to think of the Keystone. Why is there a pub in that picture? Well, the answer is because if you want a little case study of what would happen in a country without cash, one of my favourite case studies is actually Ireland. Because rather famously, in the decade from the sort of mid-60s to mid-70s, there were a series of national bank strikes in Ireland. And every time there was one of these national bank strikes, the country ran out of money fairly quickly. You know, within a couple of days, all the money that's in circulation has gone because you've bought stuff with it and you can't get any more money from the bank. The branches were shut, the ATMs didn't work. You ran out of money very quickly. So did Ireland grind to a halt? Well, the answer is no. And actually, studies of the economy show no significant economic impact. Why was that? Trust groups. Because Ireland, in those days, was still a fairly rural economy. And as a consequence, what would happen is when you couldn't get money for things, you just write IOUs to each other, right? So you, like, imagine some cataclysm came over Woking, right? Like right now, okay? It's hard to, I know, because the last natural disaster we had was the Ice Age. It's a little bit behind us. We don't have 235-mile-an-hour hurricanes and volcanoes and stuff like that. It's quite a peaceful place, Woking, to be quite honest. But imagine some cataclysm in Woking, which means we've run out. There's no cash. What are you going to do if you run Waitrose? Let's say Aldi, to appeal to the audience a bit more. What are you going to? What are you going to do? I don't want to seem so middle class. What are you going to do if you run Aldi? Are you going to let the stuff rot on the shelves, or are you going to let people walk in and give you IOUs? You could take the IOUs, of course. In fact, what you'd actually do is take pictures of people's credit cards with your phone, but that's another point. So you would just write IOUs. I get some stuff from the store. I just write you an IOU for it. And the IOUs just circulate as money. And in Ireland in those days, where was the central clearing point for these IOUs, where everybody knew everybody else and everybody knew? The pub. So the pubs just took over from the banks as the clearing centres for the IOUs, and off we went. What's our equivalent now of that? We don't, you know, the local pub isn't the hub of a trust network where I live. It probably still is in some of the areas where you are, but it's not in my part of the world. Waitrose could serve that function, possibly, in certain parts of Woking, obviously. Again, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn, it's social networks have taken over that role. If there was no money, just do the thought experiment. We could make a good science fiction movie out of it. If there was no money, I'll just email you, whatever. We'll get round it. It doesn't matter. Right, why is this coming to a head now? You'll excuse this. This is me. This was in Las Vegas at Money 2020. It's another, because he puts me up to this sort of thing, right? So that's Money 2020 in Las Vegas. It's a big conference about money. That's actually not. We wanted to sort of blend in and fit in with the locals, and just generally. So we went to a machine gun range where you can go and shoot machine gun. Well, because we want to, when in Rome. It's an old saying of ours. So we went off to shoot machine guns, and so we went to the machine gun place, and when you go into the machine gun place, they book you in, and they've got an eye, like, what guns do you want to shoot, blah, 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 and they've got the little thing plugged into the phone, so you just pay the phone, and I love it as a good example of a sort of modern business. That business will never have a conventional till and point-of-sale terminal, place where you go and pay. It will just never happen. And Machine Guns Vegas, they're showing us the way on this sort of thing. But the point is, remember, that I'm using the money example for that. But imagine that what I was presenting to her mobile phone was actually my identity, an identity, right? Suppose my phone was telling her phone, not this is a valid Visa card, but this is Dave Birch, or John Doe, or person XYZ, right? I mean, I could get my bank to issue me with an identity which says I'm John Doe. And I go out using that wherever I go. I mean, it's not like I can get up to anything bad with it. If I do anything bad as John Doe, then the police will just go to Barclays with a warrant, and Barclays will tell him it's me, right? But it means the people I'm interacting with won't know it's me unless I tell them. It means I get control over my identity. That's what we call privacy in the future. Okay, what does that mean for money? It means when all the cash goes away and all the point-of-sale terminals go away and everybody's just using their mobile phone, it means the kind of money that you use is just another menu on your mobile phone, right? I go to buy something from Sue. I say, pay Sue. I don't care whether she wants euros or yen or dollars or British Airways air miles or... I can't admit... That's the kind of boring detail that my phone can sort out with her phone. I don't even want to get involved. What does that... Sorry, that's me using a phone proving it's international. What does that mean? It means anybody can have their own money. It means the idea that money is something that's produced by the government and you have to use it, that vanishes. So people have thought for a long time, this is the Hayekian perspective, about companies issuing their own money. It's Bono's thing. The successors to Bill Gates, he could never have seen Bitcoin coming, but you see the sense of what he's saying. If you don't like their money, go and start your own. Now, I want to finish by, so that was the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. But I hope you don't mind me adding in one extra little slide, because yesterday, every year we run a Future of Money Design Award that runs in parallel with our annual, we have a forum in London once a year about the future of transactions. And for the last few years, we've run a Future of Money Design Award at art colleges and so on. And I thought there were people in the audience who might find this interesting. So if you've got a couple of minutes, please check out futureofmoneyaward.com, and I hope at least some of you will think about entering. Thank you very much.